So today I'm with Judson Root here. He's from Garnet Gray. He's an inspector that I use a lot, and I thought it would be great for everybody to meet him and for him to answer some questions about home inspections.
So my name is Judson Root. Was born and raised in Alabama. Went to college at Hampton-Sydney College and studied economics and Spanish. In 2009, I started Garnet Gray as a general contracting company and specialized in high-end residential renovations and construction, and did that for about 6 or 7 years and really got a good feel of the construction world. 2016, I decided to take the home inspection licensing test with the state of North Carolina. I've been a home inspector since 2016, so coming on 7 years of doing home inspections, and as of now I think I've completed close to 2,000 inspections. Home inspection in the state of North Carolina covers 9 major systems: the structural, exterior, all of the interior, and then the major systems. So the roof, the heating and air system, plumbing, and electrical, as well as ventilation and insulation. So as an inspector, it's hard not to look at things, but there's certain things according to the standard of practice with the state of North Carolina that are not included in the home inspection. So low voltage wiring for security systems or irrigation systems, whole house vacuum systems. Those are some of the systems that aren't going to be included in the inspection report, but there are other items that are offered as part of the inspection process through third-party vendors. So well and septic inspections, water testing, radon testing, termite inspection.
I've had a lot of clients expecting that the inspector would also look at cosmetic stuff, like if there's paint peeling or certain things that are, considered to be cosmetic. Is that something that you do add in the inspection, or usually you don't? And what do you do with that situation?
Right. So sometimes cosmetic items can be included in the report if they're a function of a defect with a major system. Okay. But for the most part, a bad paint job or things that are just worn out are probably not going to be in the inspection.
Okay.
The only exception to that would be after purchasing a new construction home. Once the buyer has lived there for 10 or 11 months, oftentimes I'll come back and do a builder warranty inspection. And at that time, once they own the property, many builders will actually come back and make cosmetic repairs. And so at that time, I'll help the owners identify the items that builders will typically repair. So I think that the more involved that buyers can be in inspection, the better. I found that clients that are genuinely interested in asking questions and understanding how the house works and operates become better stewards of the property, because they understand where the water cutoffs are and they understand how to take care of the heating and air equipment. And those types of buyers that are asking good questions are the types of people that end up taking care of their home and end up having a much shorter inspection report once they go to sell.
Yeah, okay.
I typically budget about an hour per 1,000 square feet of the property, and the average inspection probably takes about 3 hours.
And is there a difference between the price according to the size of a house, age of a house? Does that make any difference?
So I work on a floating scale, and it's a function of how much time I think it's going to take to actually do the inspection. The older the house, the larger the house, the price is going to go up. Radon is a naturally occurring gas that comes from the ground. It follows uranium deposits, and it doesn't follow property lines or zip codes. And the only way you know it's there is if you test for it. It's an odorless, colorless gas that is radioactive and is one of the leading causes of lung cancer behind smoking. So there are areas in the triangle that are known to have more prevalent radon. And in those areas, I always recommend a radon test. But to be honest, the best course of action is to just go ahead and test, unless you have some knowledge of previous tests that's been conducted. The triangle area is in an elevated zone according to the EPA for radon, and again, the only way that you know it's there is to test for it. The good thing about radon is that it can be mitigated, and at a fairly nominal price. You know, depending on the type of construction and size of construction, it could be, you know, anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000, depending on the type of construction.
Okay.
Unfortunately, radon does not discriminate between types of houses, so it doesn't just show up in basements. It doesn't just show up in crawl spaces. It shows up wherever those deposits are in the ground, and that's why we test for it.
Okay.
So in the state of North Carolina, a termite inspection is called a wood destroying insect report. You have to be a licensed pest inspector in order to conduct these tests, and the Department of Agriculture is the government entity that looks over those licenses. So in a wood destroying insect report, the pest inspector is looking for any signs, active or past, of wood destroying insects, and if those wood destroying insects have ever been treated.
Okay.
So one thing to think about when you're looking at a wood destroying insect report is if they have been there and they have been treated, what type of treatment was conducted. So unfortunately in the state of North Carolina, the pest inspector, when they treat for wood destroying insects, is only required for termites to treat 4 feet on either side of the infestation. Unfortunately, termites are subterranean, so in the event that spot treatment has been conducted, it's always a good measure to just go ahead and treat the entire property if there's no knowledge that it's been treated. Oftentimes, if there is knowledge that the house has been treated, there is sometimes a transferable warranty, and I always recommend transferring with the company that's existing as opposed to starting new. And the good contractors out there will recommend the same as well.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a great question, and a question we've spent a lot of time talking about together.
Right.
I think the first thing to think about for red flags would be a house that's been flipped. And a lot of times these houses that are being flipped, they're being done by investors. They're not pulling permits, and they're doing substandard work that creates conditions that are either undesirable or just dangerous. And we've seen a lot of houses where there's been a lot of very, very suspect work together.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, one of the things that we always talk about when we're reviewing at the end of inspection is that a home inspector in North Carolina is required to objectively work for their client and not the agent. And I've told many of your buyers, you know, to be cautious when they move forward with a certain property, or that they need to make certain repairs immediately because they're a hazard to their health, or you know, the condition in the property is going to get worse if it's not addressed immediately. And so having those conversations is giving the buyers enough information to make an informed decision. And you know, when you're looking at any property, it's always good to understand what your cash position is. If you have enough money to make repairs, if you have enough money to make future repairs that are unexpected, because they're just going to happen. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is always worth considering when looking at properties is, you know, where does the water go? You know, what's the condition of the roof? What does the drainage look like? Has there been previous water damage? You know, are there, you know, problems with the plumbing? Does it appear that there's substandard plumbing work that's been done?
Yeah.
Because I think that water is probably the number one, you know, defect that shows up on a report. A lot of the things that we're seeing in North Carolina revolves around disclosure statements. And unfortunately, sellers are the ones that are supposed to be filling out these disclosure statements. They don't always do it. Sometimes it's their agent, unfortunately. And sometimes the information in the disclosure statement isn't always accurate, or it's accurate to the best of their knowledge.
Right.
Maybe not that they're doing anything specious or contrived or trying to conceal anything, but you know, the average homeowner doesn't necessarily know what type of water pipes they have, or that they have more than one heating and air unit. So a lot of things that we've seen in disclosure statements, you know, they'll disclose that the heating and air system is from 2019 or that it's been recently replaced. When we get to the inspection, we realize that there's 2 systems, and one is as old as a dinosaur and you know, is dangerous, and the one that's supposed to be new from 2019, they only replaced half the unit. And so they've got an old furnace but a new air conditioner. And so, you know, reading these disclosure statements and understanding that, you know, you've got to take them with a bit of a grain of salt, just so that you have a better understanding of what the systems are and actual age of those systems.
Right. Okay. What about roof? Is there any red flags that you would consider when looking at a house on the roof?
So I always recommend to property buyers that somewhere between 6 and 8 years, they need to just tune up the roof. And that's going to be having a qualified roofer come in and inspect the flashing and inspect all the roof penetration, so the plumbing vent boots, if there's flues coming out of the roof in any locations, what the drip edge is doing, where the roof eave and the gutter connect, because around that 6 to 8 year mark is when you're going to start seeing your first effects. So I think that a newer roof is good, but it's rare that I get on a roof that's that age where I can't find something's wrong, that just needs to be addressed.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to replace your whole roof, but it's not uncommon to find several defects on a roof that's fairly new.
Got it.
So the first thing that I tell all buyers or sellers is that they need to make sure that water is draining away from the foundation. Again, we talked about how water is one of the biggest drivers causing defects in properties, and if the water is not draining away from your house, then you're going to end up with more problems. So make sure that your gutters are operating properly, make sure that the gutter downspouts are correctly draining away from the property, and also make sure that the grade of the property is sloping away from the house. So that would be number one.
Okay.
Number two would be biannual maintenance on heating and air. So I always recommend, regardless of the age of the equipment, that it be maintained on a regular basis. Just like you would rotate the tires on your car or change your oil, your car's expensive, you want to take care of it, and so is your heating and air system. It's one of the more expensive systems in the property, and having a biannual maintenance contract with a really good heating and air contractor is the best way to maintain that equipment and help prevent interruption on the hottest day of summer or the coldest day of winter, when you don't want your heating and air system to go out.
Which of course they always do.
Right. So that would be number two. And then on either a monthly or some other regular basis, changing the filters on your heating and air system. They need to be changed just for indoor air quality, as well as prolonging the life of the blower fan on the system. When the filters are clogged, it makes the equipment work harder and it will fail sooner than it should. So probably the last thing that I would recommend is just keeping an eye on plumbing fixtures. So if a faucet is loose or if a toilet's loose, you're going to want to address that immediately, because if it's loose, eventually it's going to leak, and a leak could result in a very expensive insurance claim. This is a great question. I think that the sellers can do a lot up front to make the transaction go a lot smoother. And I would start with getting your invoices for previous repairs in order, any contracts that you have for ongoing maintenance, whether it's pest inspectors, heating and air contractors, any of that type of information that you can disclose is going to make a buyer feel a lot more comfortable. And definitely change your air filters before you start showing your house.
Oh yeah.
So I do a fair amount of pre-listing inspections, and I think that there are certain properties where it makes sense. If the property is complicated, or if it's gone to an estate, or if it just hasn't been maintained very well, a lot of times it helps the sellers think about the repairs that they either need to make themselves or be prepared to negotiate when the transaction happens. A lot of times sellers will want to do a pre-listing inspection because they're not interested in making repairs or concessions, and so they will disclose the report with the listing and say that it's sold as is.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So much.
Glad to be here.
And I'll see you at the next inspection.
Very good.